Hello everyone, welcome to the course of Programming Fundamentals with Python. I am your resource person Kifayatullah. This is week number 3rd of the course. In week number 1, we studied about problem solving techniques and how you can improve your problem solving skills, your programming skills and so on. In week number 2, we studied about different types of languages, different types of software, the role of assembler, compiler and interpreter. In this week, we are going to talk about the Python language, the introduction to the language. So here is a brief introduction of today outline. As usual, we will start with the objectives and then we will see what is the Python language and why we use Python language instead of using any other programming language. What is the brief history of Python, the different versions of Python, and what are the unique features of this language? What are the areas where the language has been used? Or some companies who are actually engaged in using the Python language fully or partially. And then the interpreter, the role of the interpreter in the Python language. And finally, the execution model. And quiz number 1 is for the students who are actually engaged in the physical classes. So here is the objectives, the outcomes for this presentation, for this lecture. I expect that at the end of this week, the students would be able to understand the basics of Python, the chronology of the Python, the important applications of this language, and the unique features of the language. Similarly, the student would be able to discover the areas where the Python is being used, and also the student will learn how the interpreter actually works. Well, first thing first, what is Python? Before giving an introduction to the language, let me share two things. The first thing is that programming is actually a creative process. So we will be working on developing some critical skills in order to be good programmers. And second thing is that programming is actually an art. And as we know that art is an expression of the human creative skill. So actually in this course, I will help you to become a great artist and a great programmer. Well, Python was originally created in 1980s by Guido van Rossum. Sorry sir if I pronounce your name wrongly, but I'm sure it is like this, Guido van Rossum. He was working with CWI in the Netherlands. There is a confusion about the name of the Python. And the confusion is there because when you pick a book which is about Python, you will see some snakes there because Python is a type of snake which has different types of species available in different countries. But Python has nothing to do with the snakes. Actually, it is the name has been derived from one of the famous television show which was broadcasted by the BBC in 1969. It contains over 40 episodes and 4 series. Guido 1 actually loved this show, and the name of the show was Monty Python Flying Circus. So if you see the name of the show contained the word Python, so the Python, actually he loves the Python show, the Flying Circus show. So the name has derived from the show, not from the snakes. Python is actually a widely used general purpose high level programming language. What does it mean? First word is widely used. Widely used mean that Python is used by a huge amount of people throughout the world, whether they are scientists, whether they are students, whether they are researchers, whether they are artists, chemists, biologists, mathematicians, and so on. It is a widely used language because of its feature. It has been welcomed by interdisciplinary areas people. Uh, we will see the features of Python which make it an attractive language, but at the moment, Python is actually a widely recognized and widely used language throughout the world by different communities. It is a high level programming language. Now you know what is high level programming language. Actually, we have two types of programming languages, low level and high level language, and we talked about them in the previous lecture. It is also a general purpose programming language. General purpose programming language means that you can actually use the language for solving different types of problems, whether the problem is related with mathematics, whether it is related with biology, or it is related with artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data analytics, etc. So it is a general purpose programming language. It's not specifically designed for a specific community. Python is a strong language because it has many plugins available, many packages available, and many applications areas are there. So we can say it is a strong language. It is a procedural language. Procedural language means that a program, which is actually a set of statements, instruction, they are executed sequentially, one after another. We can change that order with some control statement, but normally procedural languages are executed sequentially. C language, C++ language, etc. They are all procedural languages. So Python language supports procedural programming. In a similar way, it is a object-oriented programming language. So we have two different types of programming approach. The first one is the structure approach, and the second one is object-oriented programming. We can say that Python is an object-oriented programming language, and this type of language actually focuses on the instances of a class. So objects and classes concepts are the main fundamental blocks of the object-oriented programming. So we can say that an instance of a class is called an object. Actually, we will not go into the details of the object-oriented features, but it is important to remember that Python is actually a procedural language as well as object-oriented programming language. Similarly, Python is a functional language. Again, the details are not important, but functional language is actually a language which are specifically designed to handle symbolic computation, and it deals with mathematical functions. So functional programming is great for in-demand tasks such as data analysis and machine learning, but it is something related with mathematical or symbolic computation. So Python is a strong language, widely used language, general purpose language, high level language, procedural language, object oriented language, and a functional language. Now a question come into our mind, why we use Python? Here I would mention that it is one of the most loved programming languages, one of the most loved and encouraged programming languages by the developer, data scientists, software engineers, and even hacker, because of its versatility, flexibility, and object-oriented features. So it is worth knowing, it is worth to understand and learn this language. Learning Python will actually motivate you to do highly complex tasks in a simplest way. Why we use Python? There are different features, but the three most important features are that actually the Python is a very easy and simple language, and due to this it actually put a low cognitive load on the students. It should be as easy as possible to express your problem solving thoughts in the mechanisms provided by the programming language. So easy to learn, easy to understand, easy to program, and easy to solve problem in this language. Second reason is that having spent all your time learning this language, it should be easy to apply it to the problems you will encounter in your daily life. If, for example, you want to write a program for your daily routines, you can actually use the Python language. If you want to make your activities, your calendar, daily task calendar, you can use this language for different purposes. So actually, it is a language that can be efficiently used to address the problems that arises in our life from day to day. And the third feature is that it actually support many different application areas, or you can say it is actually used in many disciplines. As I mentioned, it is used by data scientists, it is used by artificial intelligence people, machine learning people, intelligent transportation system, hackers, network programmers, web developers, database developers, and so on. Because it has many useful packages, it contains collection of different programs, different libraries, and different types of users are happy to use the Python language. So due to these and other features, we prefer to use Python. And here is a brief historical background of the language. Actually, the language itself is written in C language, and it was developed by Guido van Rossum, and it has nothing to do with the snake. It actually comes from the show Monty Python Flying Circus, which was one of the favorite shows of the creator of the developer. Python is easy to learn, and the core of the language is pretty concise. The simplicity of the Python can also be attributed to the desire of the developer to make a language that was very simple, easy to learn, and quite powerful. So to summarize, developer actually wants a language. They had a desire for a language, programming language, which is actually easy and simple to use to program with, but still with full feature. So the Python is there. It is actually a powerful language, but still it is easy to learn and easy to program with. So the desire of the developer was to have a language which is simple but still powerful, and the Python meet this objective. Python actually has different dedicated groups, different dedicated uh, communities who are engaged in enhancing the language, who are engaged in adding new features to the language. One of the forum is actually called the Python Enhancement Project, or PEP, which is actually part of the foundation PSF, Python Software Foundation, who actually take care of all the versions and releases and new features. Well, we have different versions of the Pythons. Initially, we had the version 1, which was released in January 1994, and then by subsequent releases like 1.2 in 1995. At that time, the creator of the language was working with CWI, and then followed by another version 1.4, and so on. And then come another revolution, and that is the version 2, which was actually released in October 2000. Still, it is very widely used inside the Python community. And there are different subversions like 2.1, 2.2, 2.5, 6, 7, and 2.7.1, 2, 3, things like that. But the support for the version 2 is almost over, because the communities, the developer want the people to switch to Python 3 as soon as possible. And version 3 is actually the latest version. The first release was in 2008, but after that major revisions were made to the language. Uh, However, I think it is not backward compatible with the other versions of the Python. The current latest version of version 3 is 3.9, which was released in October 2020. However, you can install the current version on Linux operating system, on Mac operating system, and on Windows operating system, but you must be careful about your operating system. For example, if you are using Windows 7, then it will not be able to install the latest version 3.9 on Windows 7. However, if you are using Windows 8 or Windows 10, then you can easily install version 3. I will make another video on how you can actually install the Python interface, the Python language, and the Python IDE on Windows operating system. A common question which arises in our minds is that is it the best language that we have available? To be honest, there is no best language. All computer languages are a compromise to some degree. And same is the case with our natural languages. Every language has some characteristics, some features, some beautiful features. For example, Arabic language is famous for its deepness. Our language Urdu is famous for romantic poetry, and the English language has its own characteristics and features. Similarly, the programming languages, they have certain features and certain limitations as well. However, the Python is considered to be a best language for beginners. If you want to learn programming from the scratch, it is the best option to go for the Python. So we think Python is a good language for beginning programmers, and also a good language for teaching Python programming courses. So that is why we have selected the Python language for teaching programming fundamentals to the first semester student of the BS. Okay, so if we consider it as a best language, it must have certain features, and some of the features of the Python language are here. The first and very obvious feature of the Python language is that it is very simple and very easy language. Easy to learn and easy to understand and easy to program with. Similarly, the Python is a language which has a very clear and clean programming syntax. If you are from a programming background, obviously you will find it very elegant and uncluttered programming language, because it will not include many header files, many colons, semicolons, braces, parentheses, and many quotes, etc. As the case is with the C or C++ language. Here we have to be careful about the syntax, which has a very complex syntax. But in case of Python, the syntax is going to be very clear and clean and concise. Similarly, it is a language which we can say is a type and run language. When you install the Python and you start working with the idle, which is the default IDE for the Python, you will see that you actually type and then run your program. So it is very simple. In most of the project, testing something new requires scores of changes and therefore recompilation and reruns. Sometimes this makes testing of a code difficult and a time-consuming task. In Python, code can be run very easily with a simple command. As a matter of fact, we run scripts in Python as well. So Python provides the user with an interactive and easy to use environment in which one can run independent commands, and this facility is sometimes referred to as type and run. Then we have the dynamic typing support. Python has its own way of managing memory associated with objects. Dynamic typing means that when an object is created in the Python, memory is dynamically allocated to it. And when the object is not required, the memory is taken back from that object. So the memory management of Python makes the program more efficient. It actually restrict the overutilization of the resources. It actually manage the memory in an efficient way. Similarly, it has built-in object types. As we will see in the coming lecture, that Python has built-in object types, and this feature make the task to be accomplished very easy and very manageable. Moreover, the issues related to these objects are beautifully handled by the language. So I will not go into the detail because these are the concepts which are related with object-oriented programming. But what is important for us that this language has numerous libraries and tools available. In Python, the tasks to be accomplished become easy, really easy. This is because most of the common tasks, they have already been handled in the Python. The availability of a wide range of libraries, modules that can be used to extend the basic features of the language. For example, Python has libraries which help user to develop graphical user interface, write mobile applications, web-based application, database application, machine learning application, big data analytics application, and so on. So it has actually support for built-in libraries and tools. It is actually a portable language. A program written in Python can be run in almost every known platform. It could be Windows, Linux, or Mac operating system. What does portability mean? That if you write a program on one operating system, for example Windows, you can actually run the same program over another operating system like Linux, as long as you are using the same version. Python is also freely available, and not only freely available, it is actually open source, not a proprietary software. One can download the Python compilers from among the various available choices, and you can download it, you can install it freely, you can distribute it freely. So you can say there are no known legal issues involved in the distribution of the code developed in the Python. Similarly, we have some other features like for example, extensibility. You can actually extend the features, the features of the language. You can extend, you can contribute even to the code and other features as well. Some of the applications of the Python language are mentioned over here. Actually, we can use this language for a wide variety of tasks. The first one is web development. Python could be used for web development and internet applications, for example, HTML, emails, FTP, etc. So it is a good choice for web development because it will allow you to write server-side code in the language. It also supports JSON and XML, IMAP, socket interfaces, etc. So if you want to write code for these applications, you can actually use the Python language. But that is not the only case. We can also use the Python language for graphical user interface application for the desktops. What does it mean? It means that you can actually build desktop application along with their graphical user interface in the Python. It has a simple syntax. It supports the modular architecture. It has a rich set of tools that can work on various operating systems. This is the reason why it is suitable for desktop applications. And there are different libraries available to work with the GUI applications. In a similar way, you can actually use the language for scientific and numeric calculations. A lot of scientists, researchers, programmers, big data people, analytics, statisticians, they actually use the Python for scientific and numerical calculation. Python's simplicity and ability to handle operations with large numbers make it pretty useful in scientific calculations. There are different libraries available for scientific and numeric calculations. For example, SciPy is one of them, NumPy is another. And also data science, which is a hot term these days, a buzzword. Data science is one of the hottest field where Python is involved deeply. Python is actually used to process large and huge amount of data to make big data meaningful, machine learning models, visualization of data, medical images processing, and so on. We are living in an era where data is generated at a rapid speed by human beings, by different machines, and by industries. So the problem is how to store the data, how to process the data, how to make the data meaningful, how to visualize the data. For that, we can actually use the Python language. On the other side, we can use Python for software development as well. It is mostly used as a support language for building control and management, testing, and automating the workflows. And also we can use it for education purposes, for teaching purposes. It is the most preferred language for beginners and for teachers. It is a good choice to learn about programming and computer science concept by using the Python language. Similarly, on the business side, you can also use the Python language. It has special libraries which actually support scalability, extensibility features, which is important for business applications. There is a popular website, Reddit, which is actually written in Python. YouTube also uses Python for some of its functionality. Auto is an example of a package which is called the all-in-one Python-based application, which offer a range of business applications. So you can use it for business application development as well, for e-commerce purposes also. Besides from these application areas, you can use it for entertainment purposes, for game development, for 3D graphic designing, and they have amazing libraries available like PyOpenGL, which you can actually use for 3D graphics and games. Oops. Similarly, you can use it for network programming. As we saw, you can use it for web, for desktop applications, for database application, for business application. Similarly, you can use it for network programming. It is actually used for making connection between the client and the server, for socket programming, for network programming. It actually support the lower level network programming. And also you can use it for hacking purposes, also, which is something related with the network programming. And also for database access, Python is used at a server side programming language. It actually connects to SQL and NoSQL databases. It is actually quite simple to connect with those databases, and there are some libraries available for database accesses. For example, PyMySQL. Mongo is another one, NoSQL database is another choice. And lastly, you can use it for audio and video based applications. Like multimedia applications, if you want to create them, you can use the Python language. Some multimedia applications which are made by using Python are TimPlayer and CPlay, etc. Well, after discussing the features and applications of the language, here are some companies which actually uses Python language as a whole, are integration part of their operations are actually based on the Python language, and you see some big names here. For example, NASA, YouTube, Google, Dropbox, etc. Finally, interpreter. If you remember, we discuss about two type of translator, the compiler and interpreter, which actually work in translating the high level language into machine code or machine language. And Python is a language which actually use the interpreter and not the compiler. So the Python interpreter is actually a program that reads the Python code and then execute the statements, the instructions found in the in the code, as you can see in the picture. Once you write your program and you are ready to give it a try, you will tell the Python interpreter to execute your program, your code, your source code, so that you can see what does it do. For that, here is the whole process. First, you need to write your code by using an editor. You can use the Ideal editor, the Jupyter environment, or even you can use the Notepad or any other text editor to write your code. And the code that you will write by using this editor is known as the source code. Once you write your source code, the code is first compiled by the interpreter, is translated by the interpreter into something which is called the byte code. And then the bytecode is passed to a virtual machine. Bytecode is basically a low level representation of the source code. The source code is actually translated to the bytecode because bytecode can run much more quicker than the original source code. But the beauty is that this process is actually hidden from the programmer. It is not exposed. The translation is not exposed to the programmer. The whole process is hidden. So when the bytecode is generated, the code goes for execution to the virtual machine. Actually, the virtual machine, which is called the PVM, the Python virtual machine, is not a separate program. It is in fact always present as part of the Python system. When you install the Python package, it actually comes with the interpreter and the subcomponent PVM. So Python virtual machine is the runtime engine of Python. You can say it is a runtime engine of the Python. It goes through your bytecode instructions one by one and carries out the operation stated in those instructions. Technically, the execution of your bytecode by the PVM is the last step of the Python interpretation process. And then finally, we have a model, an execution model, which include three phases. The first step is that the program is first when you write a program and then you want to translate the program, to interpret the program, to run the program, then three things actually happens. In the first step, the program is checked to make sure that it is a valid Python code. That is, a check is made that the program follows all the rules of the language and that each of the commands and operation etc. is understood by the Python environment. So this happens in step number 1. In step number 2, it then translates the plain text that you have written in the English like commands into a more concise intermediate format that is easier to execute on a computer. So Python can store this intermediate version in a file which is named after the original file but with a different extension. Normally when you create a file you give it an extension .py, but this time it will give another extension and that is pyc instead of py, and the C is the extension indicate it contains. C actually means that it contains the compiled version of the code. That's it. Your actual code, for example hello.py, is the source code, while hello.pyc means it is actually the extension. It is actually the compiled version of the code, the interpreted version, the translated version of the code, which is much more easier for the computer to execute. And finally, in step number 3, the compiled intermediate version is executed by the interpreter. When this program is rerun, this is something technical. When the program is run again, the Python interpreter will check to see if the p.pyc file is present or not. If no changes have been made to the source file since the pyc was created, then the interpreter can skip step 1 and step 2 and will immediately run the Python C version of the program. But if you make some changes to the original Python source file, then all the steps will be executed once again. So this was about the Python execution model. And something about quiz number 1, but is not relevant to the virtual viewers. So thank you so much for your time. Next time we will record another session about more features like the different operators and different statements that we actually use in the language. Till then, goodbye.